When you think of the Golden State Warriors dynasty, players like Steph, Klay, Draymond, and even KD come to mind as being the headliners of that historic roster. But what if I told you that it was actually a journeyman power forward named David Lee that laid the groundwork for that dynasty, as well as the modern stretch five? And if that's the case, then what happened? And why has he been largely forgotten about? The truth is, honestly, a little sad. It's been over a decade since David Lee first donned the Warriors blue and gold, but to fully get why David Lee was so important to what the Warriors were trying to accomplish, we have to go back even further. David was a stud in high school, and it was difficult to stay in front of him in the paint, as only a handful of basketball players are left-handed, making him feel almost unnatural to guard. Lee used this to his advantage, developing an absolutely nasty low-post package with spins and fakes that allowed him to nab McDonald's All-American honors his senior year of high school. David had plenty of eyes on him even then, and some even said that his success at Chaminade College Prep in St. Louis directly helped Jason Tatum and Bradley Beal get recognized years later when they went to school there. David Lee turned that All-American bid into a successful college career at Florida, where he played under current Chicago Bulls coach Billy Donovan, who helped him become second-team All-SEC his junior and senior year with respectable numbers of 11.3 points and 6.8 rebounds his last 2 years with the Gators. Although it seemed like David was a lock to make it to the league, especially in 2005 when big men were basically essential to every NBA roster, he slipped all the way down to the last pick in the first round, when the perpetually rebuilding Knicks snatched him up to pair him with Stephon Marbury. Now, David, standing at just 6 feet 9 inches and without a lot of athleticism, played most of his early NBA days at power forward, but many think that he would have had a much more celebrated career had he played just a few years later, something the Warriors even figured out, but we're getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit. David Lee owes a lot of his success to the Knicks coach Mike D'Antoni, who took over in 2008 and immediately saw the potential that Lee had. D'Antoni had just gotten done literally revolutionizing the way that offenses were run with Phoenix the last few years, and saw an opportunity to unleash David Lee as a matchup nightmare for traditional centers. Lee went from backing up Eddie Curry, the guy who Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant could barely look at because of the terrible shape he kept himself in, to averaging 18 points and 11.7 rebounds a game his first 2 seasons with D'Antoni, and really never looked back. The next year, David made the All-Star team out east with a 20-point, 11-rebound season in which felt like nobody could stay with the lefty. He was absolutely cooking dudes down low and was automatic from the mid-range. The Knicks even had him running the fast break as probably the original point center. So that's all well and good, but what happened? Well, we did say this was heartbreaking, right? Well, the next year he essentially got traded so that Mike D'Antoni could reunite with Amari Stoudemire, which couldn't have felt good for David Lee, who was playing the best ball of his career and finally had a coach that understood his game. Things kinda soured eventually with the Warriors, but a lot of people forget how solid he was for the first 4 years of his stay with a very young Steph Curry and company. David's numbers dipped from when he was an all-star with the Knicks, but only slightly. And Lee was a steadying force every night for a really young Golden State team, averaging 18.2 and 10 a night for a team on the cusp of greatness. Lee even got a second All-Star nod during the 2012-2013 season when he had another consistent year with 18.5 points and 11 rebounds. Now consistently, now in only his 9th NBA season to the bench, where he would remain for the rest of his short career. Lee was replaced technically by Andrew Bogut, who once again was the top choice over him and probably was a grim reminder that things hadn't changed that much since draft day, despite Lee having a tremendous career compared to his expectations. What really did David Lee in, though, was Andre Iguodala and Draymond Green, who would play the 4 and 5 in what was the first iteration of the death lineup, which was even scarier to play against than it was to say. David Lee's utility as a scorer and rebounder just wasn't needed anymore, especially since Draymond Green had developed into just as good, if not a better playmaker and a far better defender. Because, duh, you don't win Defensive Player of the Year just for showing up. Now, David would win his first and only ring from the bench that year, sporadically playing but often watching entire games from the bench during their playoff run. The NBA is a business, and as much as everyone loved David as a guy and respected him for helping them dig themselves out of the gutters of the West in the 2010s, he just wasn't a fit for the Warriors style, and as the league shifted to a more open, switching style of defense, Lee found himself too slow to keep up, and GMs just couldn't justify giving him a spot even for his scoring, since he was a liability on the other end. Poor David ended his career as a journeyman big, splitting the 2015-2016 season with the Celtics and Mavs, but couldn't even reach double-digit scoring for his average. He ended his career in San Antonio, which some were excited to see play out because David fit that Popovich mold to a T. The lefty big was solid, but couldn't stay healthy enough to find his rhythm, with past injuries to his hand and wrist bothering him. He would play his last game in the Western Conference Finals against his former team, the Golden State Warriors, where he would rip his patellar in his knee and not be able to return before the Spurs were eliminated. Now it seemed like the writing was on the wall and Lee walked away gracefully before things got any uglier than they had to be. The story of David Lee is a really sad one, since ultimately he helped create what would eventually shut the door on his career. You could point this out to injuries or how poorly the Knicks were run, hurting his development, but David Lee was a really solid power forward, whose step into a more modern center led to Draymond replacing him at the 5, and in the league's attempt to catch up, David ended up being left behind. Too small and skilled to be a valuable big man in his era, and too unathletic to succeed when the league shifted towards the stretch 5, Lee was a man caught in the middle, and unfortunately was a casualty of circumstance. And that is it for our video today. What do you think of David Lee? Do you feel bad for the guy, or do you think he just got unlucky? Leave a comment down below and let us know. Also, do not forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more videos like this updated every day. We'll see you guys soon.